going live. All right, yeah, we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live streaming event with some of our chapters. Today, we're hosting two chapter leaders. So do you mind introducing yourself, guys?
Yep. So from my side, I'm Lorenzo. I'm based in Helsinki, Finland, and I'm currently working as a software developer in a bank called Nordea.
My name is Christo Meid, and I'm a Scrum Master, contractor for Raytheon Technologies, working for the Air Force's Kessel.
Nice. All right. So it seems like both of you know your stuff, and that's cool. Hopefully we get to, this is an AMA, so anyone feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I have a few questions to get us started with. My first question to you is, how did you end up in the role that you're in today? Was that something that you planned for, or did you discover the role as you were doing other things?
Okay, so I guess I can start. So from my side, I was working as a business analyst in another company. And then at some point, I decided to change job, to change career. I was not looking for something specifically like what I'm doing now. It was not very well defined in the beginning. So while I was transitioning to my current career, I was exploring a bit of data science, and then I moved towards web development. And then when I started to go a bit deeper into web development, I thought, yeah, this could be actually interesting and nice. I really like the idea that you can create something from scratch. Yeah, so that's probably that's the moment when I decided to go deeper into it. And now, yes, I would say now I'm in the role where I wanted to be. Yeah.
Nice. So you were a business analyst and kind of did a bit of a career switch. Was that influenced by your coworkers or people you knew that were on the software side, and you saw their work and said, I would like to be doing that instead?
Not really, because in my previous company, I didn't really, I was not in touch with developers. So my position was something like a consultant. So I was traveling to other, to other places, talking to customers, and it was really, really like customer facing rather than say developer facing role. So that was nice, but yeah, I didn't have anything to do with developers. But on the other side, I was really frustrated that I couldn't create something on my own. Like if you have an idea and you want to try something, you think, okay, this shouldn't be that difficult. So I think that was the moment where I started to think about that, about moving towards development.
Okay. What about you, Christo?
I probably started off farther afield because I was a translator. So I have a master's in Russian language and culture, and I was living in Russia at the time and doing translation work. And then an opportunity came for me to go back to school. And I did that to get into software engineering. So I came out with a software engineering degree. But even then, switching to getting more into tech was difficult because people would tend to use me for what the gaps that they needed to fill. Since I had a background in other areas, so they would use my English language background, or then what happened is, because I'm a person that asks a lot of questions, I got into quality assurance because I was always prodding, why are we doing it this way? What could be better? So that got me into tech. But then to get where I am now, where I'm much more getting closer to hands-on as a Scrum Master. So I'm engaged with a team that's actually doing development work, and I'm helping coordinate that. But the way I got there was not so much by plan, which goes back to your original question. The role I'm in now, I got there because of being open to take on new tasks and stretch myself and get out of my comfort zone. Because I didn't picture myself being a Scrum Master, but because I'm very good at closing the loop and following up on things with people to make sure things get done and checking the quality of items, that made me a good fit for this particular role. So that's how I ended up where I am.
Okay. Great. Well, we have some questions pouring in. Let's see. Chelsea has a question. What was the most significant barrier you faced when transitioning to coding, software engineer, like I guess tech in general? What was one of the biggest barriers that you found yourself having to deal with?
You can start, Arca. I'll start.
All right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So one of my biggest was I made the mistake in my resume that I showed the languages I spoke or I studied, and that ended up being a distraction, and that's part of what ended up funneling me away from development and more into, say, the management side of things or the administrative side of things. So that was one of the things that ended up being a barrier. And then when I would remove that from my resume, then the responses I got and the interview questions would be more focused on specifically the task that I was looking for or the job I was looking for.
Okay, so basically your resume was holding you back a little bit based on the keywords and the language you were using, like how you were portraying your skills. I guess they thought this is a person for this bucket instead of that bucket, I guess. Okay.
Well, actually, part of it was, for instance, literally I meant languages, as in I showed that I spoke Russian, a little bit of German, a little bit of Arabic, and that just threw people off and would be a big distraction.
Okay. Wow. What about you, Lorenzo?
Well, that's a very good point, actually. I have to say that I agree with Christo. Yeah, I've experienced something similar, meaning that people could see my resume and then they were like, okay, but you've worked as a business analyst for a few years, so you could do something like that, right? And I was like, no. I want to change. I'm doing something to change career, and I want to be a web developer. So at some point, you have to be willing to turn down some offers, for example, if that's not what you want to do, right? So that was definitely 100%, something like that. And another point in my case was focusing on a specific language, or rather a specific direction, meaning that, as I said, I started with something like data analysis. So I was using Python there, and I was going towards data science, basically data analysis. And then at some point I switched to web development. So then you start again with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And of course, at the beginning, you could, if you go on the internet, you'll find, well, you could program with Python and you can create website with Python and you can create, the backend with Python. Yes, that's true. And you can do that with C#. There's a lot of stuff out there, right? And I think it's very, very important to find a way to follow a specific direction and don't get distracted. So in my case, this is one reason why I joined Codecademy, actually, because at some point, say you want to be a front-end developer, right? You go into the front-end developer path and that's it. You don't get distracted by Python or by C# or whatever else. So that's extremely helpful in the beginning. Just focus on what you have there, do that properly. And then later on, you'll have the skills to change.
So it seems like you were a little dispersed in the topics you were covering, and it was a little hard for you to market yourself as as your first job as a developer, career switching. It was a little bit difficult to say, this is the skills I'm really kind of, how you might be a mile wide, an inch deep. It's a saying that they have of, what are you focused on versus how many things you think you know, right? Sounds like that. Exactly. You were dealing with that a little bit. And by the way, for the people joining the event that are not in the US, a clarification that resume, it's sometimes referred to as CV or curriculum vitae in other parts of the world. So when we say resume, we're also talking about CVs. It's kind of interchangeably here in the US. Here in the US, we use resume more often to talk about the skills and like the piece of paper that shows what you know. Let's see, another question. You both self-taught or CS degree? How long it took you to land a job? Okay, so you both said that you were working on places and then you kind of transitioned to the roles that you have now. How long did it take you for that transition to happen?
So I can start. To some extent, I have to say I was really, really lucky, just because when I decided to leave my previous job, I was unemployed, right? And then I was lucky enough to follow some unemployment courses and stuff like that pretty much every country offers. And in one of these, let's say, courses or like meetings, I met this guy who was supposed to be sort of a tutor for me, someone who could kind of help me. And he put me in touch with another guy. And eventually that guy was an entrepreneur and he hired me for an internship, even though my skills at the time were extremely basic, right? Extremely basic. And by the way, he hired me as a data analyst, something like that. So it was, at the beginning, it was more on the data side, as I said. But yeah, I would say.
So how long do you say,
few.
like 6 months, a year? Between learning, like, so you're a business analyst and you're like, I want to be a developer. So between the learning of the skills and then finding someone that will give you a shot at using those skills in a professional setting, how long did it take you?
So I'd say probably 4 to 6 months. So a bit of a disclaimer here. While I was still working as a business analyst, I started to study Python and data science, and I got it was not an online degree, but I was following one course on Coursera, and the course was something like data science with IBM, something like that. So by the time I finished,
4 to 6 months might be a little fast for some people. How long were you, like, how many hours do you think you were putting every week? Like, were you every night after work dedicating yourself to this, or how much of a focus was this for you?
I would say maybe not every night. I would lie if I would say that, but I was catching up during the weekends. Yeah, like if you need to work, then the thing is that sometimes I could use what I was learning into my daily tasks at work. So instead of doing some analysis with Excel sheets, I could use some Python. So that's a good thing if you can do it, because you start to use it in a sort of professional way. That helps. Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Christo? How long did it take you, more or less, from the time you decided? I mean, I don't know if you actually decided, or you kind of like just got moved into the role slowly and discovered it. So was there a point where you said, well, I'm going to go in this direction. Maybe I should go take some classes, or maybe I should do something to add in my resume? Like, did it take you some time to train and then some time to find someone that will give you that role?
Yeah, definitely. Because as I said, I tend to get, this makes it sound like it was a bad thing, but it was a good thing for me career-wise. I tended to end up in manager roles in different capacities. So for instance, I was in quality assurance for a good long time, which in my area, you may be more familiar with the term as mission assurance, because I wasn't a tester. I was responsible for preventing defects and looking at the processes and the overall program execution from that aspect. But getting back into tech, or getting the ability to do it, that took time. So, and what had to happen was I had to switch from one company to another. And even then it took a good 8 months before I started getting more technical opportunities. And again, it came back to doing the job well, but showing that I could do more and taking classes at the same time. So I always, whenever I was looking to do a transition to bolster my confidence, I would take classes. And since we're talking technology, there's always new stuff to learn and always things you need to do to keep up to date. So that was never really the issue. But yeah, it probably took me, I mean, the shortened version would be, say, took me about a year once I set my goal to get to something more technical. This last one, I was not particularly, actually, no, that's not true. The last one, I was definitely looking to move more technical. And once I set my mind to it, it took me about 6 months. And that actually, once I got the transitions, when I signed up for Codecademy, because I realized in my current role, I wanted to do more with Python specifically in data. And that's what led me to Codecademy and why I'm here.
Okay.
But to your point, mine is more of a bumpy path, I think, than Lorenzo's, because I would go into management and come back out a little bit. But every time I wanted to get back more technical, I would go back towards learning and make sure, one thing we haven't touched on, network. So I was never burning my bridges, always trying to show people that I could do more than they maybe expected from me. And I would step up and do something that was maybe a little bit out of my comfort zone, and always looking for a sponsor, somebody that could put in a good word for me somewhere, because that's really how I found that I would make my best moves in my career.
So those last 6 months, was that when you were taking courses, do you think that, what were you doing? Like the weekends, a few hours here and there? Did you have a set schedule? Did you say, okay, I'm going to make sure I put 5 hours a week, whatever that is? Like, do you put it in your calendar, like 7 to 8 p.m.? That's coding time. Like that's project time. That's Python time.
I wish I could do that. What I try to do is I try and set myself a goal of 5 hours a week and stick to that. It tends to be, I tend to make up more of it, I think, like Lorenzo said, on the weekends. And I'll usually end up getting a half hour to an hour, a couple days a week during the week.
Okay. When I was doing the full stack path in Codecademy, what I did is I went down the syllabus and I wrote down the 43, 46, 45 chapters that he has. And I basically said, okay, how fast can I get? I did like the first 2 or 3 chapters and I timed myself like how many hours it took me to go through chapter. And I tried to extrapolate that and say, okay, if my average time is, an hour and a half per chapter, then this is going to probably take like 80 hours of work. I'm going to assume that the later chapters are harder. So I'm going to add a 20% margin on that. So 100 hours of work. I tried to like map it out in a way that I liked how I could just say, okay, if I keep up this pace by December before Christmas, I'm going to be done. And that kind of motivated me because I could see that my daily work was, driving me to that. It was kind of like mini milestones in a way. So I know that different people get motivated in different ways to get through coursework. Let's go back to the questions. I have a question: how to become a full stack engineer? Well, sir, they has a lot of answers to that. Both of you, do you have any idea, any answers for how would you go about becoming a full stack developer?
You want to go first?
I'm not a full stack developer, so that's not a question for me.
Yeah. So I think okay. So first of all, like a full stack developer is sort of a unicorn, in my opinion. Like nowadays everyone's a full stack developer, but no one is really like only a few people are full stack developer. Okay, you should. I mean, in my opinion, now that I'm working in a professional environment and I see what I know and what I should know to be like comfortable, let's say, I think you would need at least maybe 3 years in the front end and then 3 years in the back end. And then after 6 years, maybe you can be a full stack developer. Okay, that's the frank answer. Having said that, my advice would be to start from either front end or back end. I don't really have a preference. Do as you wish. Start either way. Find a job as a front end or back end developer, and then while you're working, keep studying. Full disclosure here. I keep studying every day, almost every day, or definitely every week. Other than my job, I go back to study material and I try to understand more of whatever I want to learn, and definitely more about front end and back end. But yeah, study. Well, you will never stop studying, first of all. But yeah,
the
start from the
frameworks get
front end or
updated.
back end. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll step in here. Since Christo, you said you're not from the developer, a full stack developer. I've talked to developers here at Codecademy, and in their experience, and obviously this changes from company to company and it changes from person to person, but most boot camps and places that teach you how to be a developer, they have a full stack. They make you full stack aware, not a full stack developer. It's a difference of, what the backend is and what the technologies generally are. But usually at a company, for example, here at Codecademy, you will join one of the teams, engineering teams, and they have focus areas. So maybe you are in the engineering team working on the platform side, and then you're going to be more back-end heavy, while maybe you join the team that is working with marketing on new pages and new things, and you're more front-end heavy. And that sort of gets you moving in one direction and gives you more experience in front-end or back-end. But here at Codecademy, true full stack, it's only people that have been here for many, many years, and they become these kind of like staff engineers, where there are these people that just know. They just like, everybody knows that they know, and they know how everything connects and how everything works. They have it all in their minds. But that's a very unique role. And usually, at least here, it's a lot more common for you to just, you put in your resume, you're a full stack, but you will end up focusing in one area or another, depending on the team that you're in and the projects that
I really like how you phrased it. Like, you become full stack aware, like it's not that especially when you go out of a boot camp or maybe some courses and these kind of things, you are aware of things. It's not that you are a professional developer, like, I mean, I can totally put up a website and use some Google services or AWS services to have a backend there, but this doesn't make me a full stack developer. Okay. I kind of know how to work my way around, but yeah,
I think this is very common that a lot of people that get into tech, especially the first job in tech, there is a before and an after. Like once you get in that professional setting and you start talking to the developers and you start realizing what is truly possible, or how the complexity level of projects, I think there's like a realization of, I thought I knew, but I don't. A lot of people like they feel like they know, and then 3 months later, like 6 months after they got their first job, you ask them and they change their mind and say, no, actually I don't know anything. I thought I knew. I have a lot to learn, right?
Yeah.
There's a before and after. Okay, more questions. Let's see. Did you have a coding portfolio to share with potential employers to show your skill set or completed projects? Okay, yeah. So this applies to both of you. Did you have to build up some sort of portfolio to get that job, or I mean, for example, Christo, in your case, you were in management and you moved through management roles. How do you showcase the impact you had in those roles, and how that was worthwhile in the next role? Like how that, translated into your next role?
That's a great question. Part of it comes back to sort of the resume aspect of it. One of the things that I learned in my trip, because for me, where I am, because of the different programs we work on, for instance, I can't have, like I'm a contractor, I can't take my code from one place to another and show that. So it has to be in my resume. So it's going to be describing with the work I did, the impact I had, talking about, so if I were managing, how many people I was managing, the dollar value of the program, or the impact of the program when we were done. For me, also what comes to it is that the people on the program I was working on, and when I say program, that's a project that has a many-year phase to it, if you will. In government contracting, it's not a computer program, it's a project that has multiple years to it that evolves over time. That's a program. And what's most important, therefore, your next position is the people you work with that can then vouch and say, this is what they did, this is what they're good for. Yes, I recommend this person because he really helped with this. So that's how you build your reputation, and you use that to move forward.
Okay,
that's critical for me.
So both project management, I mean, not project management, project showcasing, but you also put a lot of emphasis on networking and people vouching for you, I guess. Okay, I know that's a big one, especially when you're trying to get into some companies. They usually have referral programs, and it's not something that people utilize often enough. I feel like a lot of people don't really, they feel shy, or they feel like it's not appropriate, but it is totally appropriate. Like every company, or most companies, have some sort of referral system where people that work at that place can highlight potential candidates, right, for roles. So I feel like that's probably a big plus.
And if I could tag onto that specifically, okay, I won't name any companies, but often what I've seen is that the recruitment process and the system may not be the best system for recruiting particularly. There might be some gaps in it for certain. So if you have a referral, if you have somebody on the inside that is helping you get the position, not in the sense of getting the job, but they can monitor how your resume is going through the system and help resolve any glitches in that area or speak up for you. So it's a matter of also sort of overcoming a system that might not be ideal. So having the person on the inside that you can use is really valuable. And it's not saying that your skills are less, it's just making sure that your skills are seen for what they are at a minimum.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where you apply for a job and 5 minutes later you get rejected, and it wasn't a person, it was the system automatically rejected. It was the server.
Right.
You just didn't have the right keywords in your resume, I guess.
Exactly.
What about you, Lorenzo? Did you have to build up any portfolio? You said you found an entrepreneur that hired you for some basic skills. Were you at the same time building a portfolio for your skills?
Yeah. So at the time, as I said, I started to work on Python and data analysis while I was still working in my previous company. And basically, before leaving the company, so let's say we're speaking about May of that year. By that time, I had, let's say, some portfolio regarding some data analysis project that I did during the certification, during the kind of course that I was following online. So I was definitely able to show that, and I was able to kind of explain why I did that and what I was trying to get out of that. And that surely built some confidence in the other person. Other than that, I'd say that after that, while I was working for him, in my spare time, I was also like coding and of course building some small projects on the side. And I have to say that when recruiters called me a couple of times, they mentioned, yeah, I've seen stuff on your GitHub profile. So it is, someone is looking at that. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
I'm not saying everyone is doing that, but someone is.
We actually had, I've been talking to recruiters in live streams here at the Codecademy YouTube channel. There's like 6 episodes of those. And every recruiter would always say the same thing, which is make sure you have a LinkedIn page and make sure you have a GitHub repo if you're going to be getting a developer job, because we look at those all the time. They said, we don't look at each one, like we don't always look at them if you don't get through the initial screening of your resume. Like a lot of recruiters have to read through hundreds of resumes. But if they see something interesting in your resume, their next step is most likely going to be finding more information about you as a candidate, either on your LinkedIn or in any other online page that you might have, your personal page you might have provided, or your GitHub repo. So I know that tends to be the case, that the recruiters always look at that. Gotta make sure you have a good one set up. We actually have a moderator in Discord that he didn't build any portfolio projects. What he was doing is, well, not as specifically, but he was helping a lot of open source projects online. And it got to the point where people that he was collaborating with asked him, where do you work? And he said, nowhere. I'm just like self-teaching myself code. And people are like, you don't work anywhere? Here's a link to my website. Here's a link to my jobs website. Here's a link to my company. And they started inviting him to apply for jobs. He said, look, you definitely have the skills. You're collaborating in these open source projects with us on GitHub. And you definitely, like, we would, like, if I could, I would hire you. So sometimes the power of networking, so it all comes together. Let's see, more questions. If you guys had to have a different job, which one would it be? If you could just pack it up, and let's imagine that somebody drops 100 million in your bank. You don't have to worry about money, and you say, well, now I can do anything I would like to do. What would you do? An orchard, beekeeper, surfer? I don't know. What would you go for?
To be honest, I don't think I would change that much now, because first of all, a step back. I was studying React, as you can study on Codecademy, and because it's very, very popular. And then they hired me to work as a front-end developer with Angular. So I kind of started from scratch. Angular seems super hard to me, so I'm learning a lot of things. But in the end, I like it. If I would get, say, $100 million, I would just probably focus on some pet projects, like stuff that I would like to have in the world, and that's it, right? Nowadays, I have to spend most of my time working, which is also about learning, of course, but I cannot work that much on my personal projects. But yeah, I think I wouldn't change.
So is that, if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds a bit like you would still be a developer, but maybe an entrepreneur developer, like you would start a company or do some personal projects on your own. Like if you could remove the risk of needing to pay your bills and your rent and things, you might have like start working on your own personal projects. So that would make you an entrepreneur, I guess.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Entrepreneur. Nice.
Maybe,
we'll keep an eye on your mobile apps.
Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, look, if you get a bunch of money, you can go on a beach and have some fun for a couple of weeks and months, maybe. And then after all, I think it becomes, money, like they make you happier for a while, but then you kind of revert back to your status, to your kind of sort of happiness status. That
just be one of those influencers posting like little coding TikToks, 5 programming languages to learn, like things like that. Just be one of those coding influencers.
Exactly.
3 portfolio projects you need, like those people posting on Instagram, and you could be from the beach, from the hotel. What about you, Christo? If you could drop everything and do something else, what would you do? A ranch, maybe? Cattle? Horses?
Oh, no. That's not me at all. No, I'm a city person pretty much. So you'd see me in a big city somewhere. But actually what I would do right now, because it's been my recent interest, I would probably work primarily on developing my mobile app skills. That's A, but I'd be looking specifically at decentralized social apps. So blockchain has become something I've been interested in now. And now there's the DSO. I don't know any of you are following that. So it used to be called BitCloud. They rebranded at the beginning of September, I think, to DeSo, Decentralized Social Media.
Okay.
And they're creating that based on the blockchain. There's now an opportunity, and there's a lot of projects that are doing. I think there are 100 projects that are starting up to develop on this blockchain decentralized social media. So it's really interesting, and it's very open. And since it's the beginning of this, like if I got that $100 million now, I could drop everything and start doing like startups on apps that I think would be great, and do the user-centric feedback approach to make sure that it would actually work. You know, that would.
So it sounds like both of you are going to the entrepreneur side. Both of you would just like drop everything and start your own companies, I guess, and run your own projects, I guess, in decentralized finance. I feel like the blockchain technology now, it's sort of like machine learning 10 years ago. Like in 2010, after, you know, when the iPhone 3 came out, the first iPad, everybody was talking about machine learning and like the power of machine learning. Like if you wanted to start a company and you wanted to have angel investments or any sort of VC fund investments, you needed to have machine learning in your tagline, right? In your company, like it had to be about that. And I feel like blockchain's a bit like that now in the 2020s, where if you start any sort of company, you have to say that you're working with the blockchain in one way or another.
NFTs. It's all about the NFTs.
NFTs. We should start. We could take a screenshot, make an NFT of this AMA, sell it. Okay, so let's see. More questions. There's an I want to be career switcher. Interesting. Okay, so this person wants to be a career switcher, focusing on front-end development, but they get the feeling that they're not smart enough. Which areas is more value in the tech world? Okay, so I guess this kind of like a general question of like how smart you need to be, or like how capable you need to be to break into tech. And I'm assuming that the answer is going to be somewhere along the lines of anyone can do it, but I want to hear your answers.
I can start, I think, on that one, because one of the things that I think a lot of people, and I'll talk from a US perspective, because we tend to be more aggressive in our resumes, if you will, more assertive about how wonderful we are and all that. But there's also the flip side of that. When people look at the job requisitions, they'll see all of these requirements in that requisition, and that will scare people off. If you, in the United States, if you have 80% of the requirements that you see in the resume, you are overqualified for that position. So if you have 50%, I would say apply, because there's always this wiggle room in a position where you may have some skill that's not in the requisition from your current career. For instance, I think there's somebody on Codecademy that has a background in genetics. Well, if I were working in a biotech company, that could really play into helping get you your first position, but it may not be on the requisition form. So don't underestimate the value you have. Try and make sure that that's in your resume as, you know, aside something that of interest that makes you stand out, but not a distraction. And don't hesitate to apply for positions. The worst they're going to do is reject you. As long as it's not taking a long time to invest. And again, if you have somebody inside that can help you tweak your resume to fit the company's lingo, that can help you get in also. You know, again, that's not doing anything unethical or illegitimate. That is really trying to show that you're doing your research on the company and aligning your resume and your application to that company. And that will help you get the position. Because there's so much you can learn. When we were hiring at Kessel Run, when we were hiring to do a particular project, I was engaged in the hiring, but I wasn't one of the hiring managers per se. And one of the interesting things I did that might help this person is they forced the person during the interview to do paired programming. In this case, it was paired operations because it was more DevOps. And I asked the person doing the interview, what exactly are you looking for? Because there's no way this person's going to know the ins and outs of our environment until they're in it. So how are you gauging whether or not they're really qualified? And the person said, I'm really looking for curiosity more than anything. Because the person, if they're smart, is going to learn what I need them to learn to get the job done. And we're working as a team. So they're going to always have somebody that can help them with the areas they don't know. But the curiosity was a key thing. If the person is open to being told, I think you could do it better if you follow this path, and asking questions, then I know that that's a long-term, very valuable employee that I want to have on my team, because that's going to be a person that's going to help me solve problems. So that's what I'd say to that person is don't sell yourself short. and play to your strengths and allow for the fact that there are personality traits that can actually win the job for you.
What about you, Lorenzo?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree with Christo. Other than that, I would add a few things. Maybe I'm a contrarian here, but I don't believe that programming is for everyone. As everything. I mean, some people like it, some people won't like it. And it's simple like that, right? So if you don't like programming, but you want to do it for, I don't know, money, it might work, right? But in the long term, I don't think you'll be happy. Simple like that. Now, if you like programming, or at least you think you like at the moment, that's fine. And here I'm quoting a person that was following. I listened to some of his conferences, and he told us, look, you need three things to enter the world of programming, become a software developer: isolation, references, and perseverance. Okay, so why those three? Because first of all, perseverance. This is not a short-term game, right? If you want to become a programmer, you can start with maybe a couple of hours per week, very, very slow-paced, but you know that it will take more time, and that's fine. But you'll get there at some point. The more time you invest in that, the easier you will get it. So you should play for the long term first, and this is perseverance. Reference, this is what I mentioned before. Find a specific path that tell you, look, at the end of this, you'll have the basic skills to be a front-end developer. So for example, the path that we have in Codecademy, just find that path, or a mentor, whatever you prefer, but then just focus on that. Don't spread yourself too thin. And the third thing that I was mentioning is isolation, because everyone else around you has its own life, right? They are doing whatever they are doing, and they don't really care if you will become a developer or not, right? Actually, for them, they probably, your friends would like to have you there on a Saturday evening, and they would like to share a drink with you, and so on and so forth. But at some point, if you want to become a developer, you have to say no to a few things and focus on your learning until you get a job, probably. And this is maybe a hard truth, but it is something you probably should be aware of. Yeah, I would put it that way.
I feel like to nuance your answer, I feel like some people, there's many ways to learn, and everybody's a little different. Some people like to take notes, some people like to watch videos, some people prefer audio, and others prefer to read the lessons. I feel like that you need to be aware of yourself a little bit and how you learn. And if you feel like you're not smart enough because you're going through lessons too slow, you should try out to find lessons in a different format or in a different way, and see, maybe try to study a different time of the day. Maybe you're trying to learn to be a developer after your hours of work. Well, if you already put 8 or 9 hours at your daily job, they make you work in the day because that's when you're productive, right? So at night you're already spent, and you go home, and maybe you need to take some time off, use your vacation days to see if you study better. Sometimes it's a matter of the platform you're using to learn. It's not adequate to the style of learning you have. So there's a few variables to take into consideration. And if you try a few things and you still feel like you struggle with motivation, or you still struggle with learning programming, you can also try to find peers online or projects or things to collaborate with. And I would say, once you've gone through a few of those, if you're still struggling, then maybe you have to start considering, like Lorenzo said, is your motivation in the right place? Is this really what you were looking for? Or maybe you thought this was what you're looking for based on, like a movie you've watched, like someone telling you how much money they make as a developer. So I would say you need to try a few things first before you give up, like, completely, because everybody's a little different, and it might just be that nobody explained it to you. Like this happens a lot with I have friends. I would say, I'm really bad at math. I said, well, you probably are not bad at math. It's just that nobody ever took the time to explain it to you in the way that you understand it. Because basic math, right? Like, oh, I can't add, like you're doing shopping and 13 plus 7 is too much. It's like, nobody should struggle at that level of math. So this must be that just the learning you took was just not effective for you. So be aware of yourself and your capabilities. Sometimes it's just a matter of looking at it from a different angle. But you also have to be realistic that, yeah, not everybody's going to be able to program. That's just fact. Maybe it's not fun for you.
If I can just expand a bit on this.
Yep.
Another very important thing that I would add is that you shouldn't compare yourself with other people, right? I mean, if you look at other people learning, let's say exactly whatever you're learning, exactly the same thing, right? Maybe they are students, or maybe they are unemployed, they can dedicate 8 hours per day and they will progress faster than you. And maybe you have a job and you have to work after your job, and you can only dedicate a few hours per day or even less, right? So there's no way you can progress as fast as they are progressing. So as a rule of thumb, you, especially when you're learning something like this and you're doing it because you want it, don't compare yourself with other people. Just compare yourself with what you did yesterday, okay? And if today you can just do a few small things, that's perfect, that's fine.
That's I follow this guy that he has a very similar principle. He says, if you could every day you should be able to look back at your clone from yesterday and like, are you better than that person? Like, kind of like, just as long as you are improving personally. Obviously there's nuances to this, right? Like if you're trying to for a job or something where there's 15 candidates and you're one of 15, yes, you're gonna have to somehow be better than them. But if you're just learning, just the learning aspect of it, I guess it's not healthy to say, well, somebody went through this lesson in an hour and it took me 2.5. I must not be good at this. Well, yeah, yes, no. Depends if you put the time. Other questions. Let's see. Somebody here says, I'm 15, loving coding, but I'm doing Python and C++. What is next? Okay, so they're doing Python, C++. What is next? I guess my question is, what are you trying to do? Learning to code? Like, where you're trying to go? Are you trying to be a web developer, a game developer, a mobile app developer? You're learning Python, C++. It's a little hard to know what will be next. Like, what do you think that is next? So if you're learning Python, C++ at a surface level, what's next? Like data structures or algorithms, or what will be the next logical step?
I would hope if they're doing C++, they probably already had some data algorithms and structures. But you're right, that would be a great place to go back to make sure that you've got that under your belt before you move forward. But it sounds like maybe the next step, I'm assuming they're saying they're starting with the programming languages, then the next step I would think would be moving on to projects, maybe moving on to projects where you're working with somebody else. Because, and even I have this tendency, I tend to do things on my own because my time is so varied when I can actually work. But the reality is when you get into business, you're going to be working with somebody else. So if you can get somebody to pair with on a project, I think that would be a great move for you. And pick something really small if it's your first project. Make sure you understand what it is that, when are you going to be done? Like, what's going to be your first really simple iteration on whatever you're developing. If it's a game, make it really simple that just barely gets done what you want to do, so you can test it and test your assumptions and see what works and then move on. One of the things that I've learned from working in Kessel and from the past couple of years, you want to experiment and test your assumptions, and you want to do it in iterative, smaller cycles. It's more interesting, so you can get stuff out to people. You can, if you're developing a game, you can have your friends try and say, hey, I'm developing this really simple game. I want you to give a look at it and see what you think. What do you like? What don't you like? What could be better? And the feedback you get from them is invaluable for figuring out what to do, your next steps could be. And knowing how to adapt and seeing how you have to adapt what you're doing based on feedback is a really critical skill in today's world. So I do recommend working with somebody else and trying to get feedback from another group of people potentially on whatever you're doing. And I think that'd be a great next move for you.
Yep, very good point. If anything, I would add maybe, well, like the way I see it now is that you have a hammer and a saw, right? You can do a lot of things with that, and that's great. But you don't know what you want to do, right? What, do you want to build a house? Do you want to build a boat? Do you want to build a fence, maybe? Like and as Federico and Christo were saying, like, yeah, you can go pretty much everywhere with those two languages. Those are, I mean, they are very good that you started from there, but you can expand pretty much everywhere. So try to build some project and see what you like. more, like maybe you don't
Nice.
like game development at all. Maybe you want to go deeper into some data analysis, and then after a while you discover that you don't like that one either. So yeah, just try a few projects, and it is a bit like Christo was saying, try small things, and then get feedback from yourself, right? Do you like it, or you don't like it? Fine, and then try again something else, right?
And I would say one thing to remember when you're learning to code at the beginning is that at companies, in a professional setting, you will not be doing all the things that you're doing when you're coding on your own. So for example, you might have a team lead, you might have a product, you might have a manager, you might have a product manager, you might have directors and VPs. And there's a lot of people planning the steps ahead for you so that all you have to do is focus on the building aspect of it. And this is something that I see a lot with beginners with coding, where they will say, hey, I learned the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But once it comes to building something for my own, I blank. I'm totally blank. Like I know the tools and I don't know what to do, right? Like Lorenzo was saying, you have a hammer and some nails and some wood, but like once it comes down to like doing something on your own, that is not the IKEA pamphlet, you don't know what to do with the tools. And that's totally normal. You have to accept that these project management skills and this kind of planning, that's a different skill set. Learning JavaScript doesn't teach you how you can plan a project on a sprint so that you can get it done and iterate through it and improve it over time. That's just it's separate things. It's totally separate. So it's totally normal if you're learning programming languages that you don't know what to do with the languages. It was going to take some time for you to figure that out. And then once you get a job in a few years, you're 15. So once you get a job in a few years, I guess you will have people telling you what to work on because it's just, that's just not your area of focus. Your area of focus is using the hammer, not planning which bed to make. Let's see another question here. Someone with a non-computer science degree trying to stand out by using portfolio to showcase my skills. Do you recommend any projects to work towards? All right. So is there any kind of project or type of project that might showcase your skill better than other projects?
Okay, so if I can start here, I'd say, so broadly speaking, there are a few projects that are trivial, like a to-do list, which like everyone has, right? But it's a good way to start just because anyway, you need to use a few things in the language or in the framework that you are using that will be helpful, right? So if you can do a to-do list, that's already something. Now, of course, you want to do something more than that. So definitely get some data from the internet. There are a few websites where you can fetch data and use a bit of calls to maybe change data as well. One of them is called JSON placeholder. So if you go there, basically you can download some fake data regarding, I think it's some website like Facebook, say, right? So there's like users, there's posts, there's albums, whatever. So try to get data from there and display it in your website as you think it would fit best. So that shows me that you are able to, well, get data from the internet and display it correctly. And it shows me that you are able, or you should be able to handle some errors in case data is not coming, and so on and so forth. So rather than specific projects, I'd say I'd like to see how you handle these things. Error handling, data from the internet, these kind of things, yeah.
Cool.
I guess the only thing I'd add is if you know the industry you want to go in or the type of company you want to work for, try and make sure that your portfolio aligns with that, because that will draw more of their interest. And probably then they'll be able to ask more intelligent questions about your work specifically, and you'll be able to respond to it. I think that will get the engagement. So, and you might be able to, if you can do that as you're applying for positions, indicate which of your projects that you'd recommend they look at for that position. I think that would probably be useful also and save them some time. Anything you can do to save a recruiter time is going to be valuable.
Yeah, that's I think one of the recruiters that I talked to here at Codecademy, they said the same thing, that when looking at portfolio projects, they know the tech stack that we use at Codecademy, right? Like the tech stack being all the software and all the frameworks and all the languages that we use at Codecademy. when they see candidates that have experience in those things first, it's not a make or break situation, but it does give you an edge over other competitors that might not have knowledge in that kind of code base or that kind of frameworks that are used here. Because if you know Django instead of another framework like React, it is translatable and it is something that you can easily move from one to the other, but still takes more time than somebody that's already a native developer in React, right? So it comes down to these situations where out of 3 really good candidates, who has a slight edge, because they can only hire 1 out of 3. So I think that's really good advice to work on projects that will be meaningful to the company that you're applying for. And like Lorenzo said, try not to make them trivial, because you won't be hired for the project you did. Like, oh, we liked you to implement this in our code base. They're probably going to ask you questions like, why did you do it this way? What motivated you to make this choice? What was the trade-off that you did when you chose Node.js instead of this other thing? Why Express, right? Like, they will ask you these questions, and they're more interested in knowing your mindset and how you work through problems than the problem itself. Because everything else will come with experience and your mentors and working with people that have more years of experience than you. So build projects that are not just copy and paste. Be mindful of the project you're building and make sure that you can explain why you did it the way you did it. That's probably a big one. How can we know that we're ready for a job or an internship? This is a really big question. It comes up all the time in the community at Codecademy with all the beginners. Is, I don't feel ready. I've built 3 projects. Is that enough? Should I do 5? Should I spend a month? Should I spend 3 weeks? There's this imposter syndrome of saying, I've taught myself this, so I'm not legit. I'm not a PhD in computer science, so I probably don't know what I'm talking about. And it's really hard to break through that, to say, I feel comfortable, I feel confident in my skills to talk to recruiters about this or to apply for jobs. So do you have any tips on how to get over that wall?
I think the first thing is, if you have any friends that are software developers or in the area you're looking to get into, ask them. Because if they're your friends, well, backing up, when we think about ourselves, we tend to be more critical about ourselves because we know our faults, we know our strengths, and maybe we know our strengths. But if you ask your friend, do you think I'm ready for a position like this? Or a couple of friends is probably even better if you ask them. They may come back and say, I think you're almost ready, or yes, I think you're ready, or you're overqualified for it even, right? Because your friend might know, if they're looking at your portfolio, see what you've done, and they would have the context of understanding that position. Then they could advise you on what you might still need to do, or if you're ready to apply for it. And they might bolster your confidence also, because the first job is always the hardest one to get.
Yeah, I'd say the first job is definitely the hardest one to get. Once you have the first one, it's like, okay, oh, this guy is actually a developer. Yeah, totally like that. But regarding your question, it's a tough one. I was in your shoes, 100%. What I could say is try to apply earlier than later. Earlier is better than later, I would say. That's something. Now, how to define earlier? That's a tough nut. I think, ask to some developers friends. But in the end, maybe get a list of companies that are interesting to you, and then a list of like B companies where you are not very interested. And apply to the companies in your second list, right? So even if you fail, you are like, okay, I tried, and maybe they give you some feedback as well, and you know what they want. You know how far you are from being sort of ready. I would say that you have to try. You have to try some interview.
I think my advice would be. The way I looked at it was, okay, who feels like they're ready to apply for jobs when they're learning to be developers? And my first answer that came to mind was bootcamp graduates. You go through a bootcamp, 3 months, 12 weeks, something like that. And, at the end of the bootcamp, they are all told you're ready to apply for jobs. So if you use that as a guiding principle of these people went from 0 to developers in 12 weeks, what did they learn to the point where the people that run these bootcamps feel confident that they can apply? And if you're doing a full stack kind of bootcamp, you can look at the technologies. You can find friends, make friends online in communities online, like the Codecademy Community or in the Stack Overflow and any other communities. That too. Find people that have gone through bootcamps and ask them what the syllabus was. Okay, we learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Node.js, Express.js, Bootstrap, and we built like a back and front end. We did a portfolio, and then I got told to start sending resumes out. If that's what they got told, then that's the line. That's the line you need to cross. Like whatever you learn in a bootcamp that is expensive or online on coursework that you found online, learn those things and start applying, because if they can do it, you can do it too. There's no difference between them and you. If that's what if bootcamps feels like that's the qualifications you need, then don't stop doubting yourself. That's it. That's where you have to be. Don't worry about it. Like bootcamp graduates usually build like one big project at the end, like a capstone project. Like then, yeah, how many projects you need? One big one. People get jobs with one big one. Like, what else can I say? Yeah, it's that seems to be the equation here, the algorithm, the winning strategy. I'm doing the full stack course on Codecademy program building industry. Okay, yeah. So I guess okay, so we got last two questions. It's 11:59. Okay, so last two questions. We'll go through them quickly. Number one is they're doing the full stack course on Codecademy. Will this prepare me for web dev jobs in the industry? Is it more as a supplement than primary course? So either one of you that work with developers, if you are familiar with what the full stack coursework is at Codecademy, what it teaches more or less, would you say that that is something that is preparing people to be developers, or do you see that more as a secondary source of knowledge that they should be looking for someplace else to learn to code? I think that's kind of the question: is the full stack path,
is it enough?
Deep enough? Yeah, is it enough? What do you think, based on your experiences?
I'd say it is. So I'm also in the full stack path, by the way. I didn't finish it yet, but I'm working, so that tells you something. This is a personal preference. I like to explore different resources as well. So when something was not clear from the full stack path that I was following in Codecademy, I was checking the same information elsewhere. There's MD and there's like a bunch of other resources online. So definitely do as you wish. It is well done though. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think the one thing, if you want to bolster it, I'd pick probably one area in the full stack course and go deeper into that. Make sure you've got that. So you have one thing you could say, and within the full stack, this is really what I like to focus on, so that you've got one strength area that you can talk to. Because like what Lorenzo was saying earlier, I know a couple of people that officially have the titles of full stack developers, and they both laugh and say, there's no such thing as a full stack developer. So
no, especially the funny thing is that developers working, they are the first ones to say that. Like they think they're full stack developers. They get a first job, and like you can ask them like a week later, and they go like, "Nope, I'm not a full stack. I'm a front end developer." And they themselves will like retract their title.
But I think the way where that also plays into it, and this might play into the person's response also, is that if you get into an agile team that's meant to be cross-functional with a lot of different capabilities and skills, that whole team together is probably full stack developers, right? Because they've got the knowledge all together. And so you just have to be able to provide a slice of that knowledge to that team to be valuable.
Okay. And last question. Let's see. Somebody asked, what are your opinions on internships? Are they worth the sacrifice of time and financial opportunity cost? So I guess some internships are not paid. Some internships are, they take you for 3 months or something like that. And it's just the experience, but they don't pay you. And it's just time consuming, obviously, because you could have done something else with that time. What are your opinions on these kind of internships? And is it a good way to get a job? It's not. Should you do it? Should you just focus on getting a full-time job?
I think internships can be very good, but they should always be paid. If the company's not going to pay you for an internship, then I think that's already showing how they're going to value their employees. And I don't think that's probably a company you're going to want to work for. And I would expect that they probably will exploit you, and it won't be a very good situation. That's just from what I've heard from the industry. I wouldn't recommend taking a non-paid internship. You can get some real value from the internships. It's a great way for you to get your foot in the door in a company, see what they're doing. They'll help you and bring you up to speed in their industry and their area of expertise. And usually, often that will lead to a job right after that. So you may do your internship, I guess, I don't know if you're in college in your junior year or something like that. After your senior year, if things went well during your internship, you will likely have a job offer from that company if they liked you. So that makes the process much easier. So I do recommend them in that aspect. Lorenzo?
Yeah, I can second Christo totally. It's a foot in the door, and well, in my case, I took a pay cut, right? Moving from a full-time position to an internship. I went through an internship. That was definitely a pay cut. Did I learn something? Yes. More important to me, it was, well, I could write on my CV or resume, I am a developer at this company, right? And that says something to the market, to the industry, right? You are a developer at that point. You are working as a developer, and someone is or maybe is not paying you, but you are working as a software developer in a professional environment. And that is kind of key, in my opinion.
Okay, I think there's two main things with internships that you might want to think about, because remember that when you're interviewing for a position, you can interview them too. You need to make sure that it goes both ways. It's not just you begging for a job. You also have to make sure it's a good fit for you and for your goals. I would say two things about internships. Number one is when you are going through the process, ask them if these internships are structured in a way that there's a chance for you to become a full-time employee at that company. Some companies look for internships and they have it a very structured, like internships and you go away. And some other companies, they do tell you if the internship goes well, there's a good chance that you will get a full-time offer at the end of your internship. So figure out if the company that you're trying to intern for has this kind of work opportunity. And number two, there's a difference between internships when you are a working professional and when you are in school. If you're doing let's say a 4-year university degree and you are in the summer between your second and third year, any internship is going to be better than just going home to enjoy summer. Like if you go home and all you're going to do is just play video games and go with your friends, it would have been a better use of your time to go that July and August somewhere to a company and add an internship than it would have been to just do nothing. So that's a different setting. If you're already a working professional and you're going to take a pay cut or you have to like quit your job to be this internship, that's a big asking to do. But it's totally different. You're a student. Yeah, internships are great. You might get a job afterwards, right? They say, hey, we loved you. When you graduate, let us know, right? Okay, well, we are over time. So we are going to call it a day. We've been here for an hour. Guys, can you believe it that we've been here for an hour?
It was a breeze. It was a lot of fun.
It was nice talking to you all. Nice questions.
Yeah, and
all right.
Anybody on the channel, if you're in the Codecademy Discord, hit me up. You'll find me there. You can, if you have any additional questions you want to ask, whether it's related to working for the government or whatnot, feel free to hit me up.
All right. Well, thank you, both of you. And I'll cut. Well, Lorenzo, any final words?
No, I was just saying, same for me. Like, feel free to get in touch on Discord. That's quite a good channel. I'm not super responsive lately because I need to learn a bunch of things with my new job. So, yeah, excuse me for that. But yeah, I'll try to answer. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll catch you on the next live stream. We're always doing live streams here on the YouTube channel on Codecademy. So just keep an eye out, subscribe, all that good stuff. And join our community and find the chapters. I mean, you both have a chapter, right? The Helsinki chapter and also the Scrum Club chapter. So keep an eye out for the chapter events because they are awesome and they are hosted like every month. So also go to our community.codecademy.com and join our chapter page. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that's it.